Shabbat shalom, everybody. This is Rabbi Stephen, Rav Shmuel, Rashbi. I kind of like that name. It's kind of an, what do you call it when you take the first few letters? I want to say an anagram or an anagram, whatever. You can tell me. But Rashbi, Rav Shmuel ben Yehoshua, right? First letters of my name. Kind of like Rashi, which is Rabbi, I forget, Rambam, Rabbi Moses ben Maimonides. So, not that I'm a sage, not that I'm that wise, but I just kind of like it. So, a little bit of goofiness and quirkiness on my part. So, question came up. First of all, Happy New Year to everybody. Happy secular New Year. Hope you had a good weekend and you enjoyed some time off. And now we're going into the secular year. Question came up. Do we want to recite blessings for the secular New Year? And the answer is no. Same way we don't say a prayer for Thanksgiving. Now, interestingly enough, of course, these being two secular holidays, there are Jewish versions of both the New Year, which we know, of course, is Rosh Hashanah, which typically occurs during the secular calendar, September, early October, and the Jewish Thanksgiving, yes, is Sukkot, which occurs right after the New Year. Because we have the new year, we're looking ahead to the new year, to being better. And of course, Yom Kippur is our Day of Atonement when we want to be better. And Sukkot is when we give thanks for the bounty, which is the fall harvest, similar to the regular Thanksgiving. Doesn't mean if you want to say a secular prayer or honor it in some way, that's fine. But, you know, in Judaism, we just acknowledge it. We live in this country. We live in the Western world, and as the sages have said, when you live in society, you do your best to honor the rights and the rituals of that society, New Year being one of them. Now, let's move on a little bit. Going forward, I'm going to adapt my Devar Torah a little bit, my 10-minute Torahs. Had a ritual committee meeting, and it was suggested that instead of during Saturday morning services, as we start the Torah service, instead of just a synopsis of what's going on in that particular portion, maybe a lesson, a true Devar Torah. That's really what Devar Torah refers to. That's really the connotation. The denotation, the meaning, Devar, speaking Torah of the Torah, speaking of the Torah. And we're going to give a lesson. Now, being that as a conservative synagogue, we have adopted the Rabbinical Assembly, or I guess it's the Committee of Law and Justice and Judicial Standards, that we divide each year into reading a specific third of the portion. This year being the triennial portion, year 3 of the last third, the last triennial cycle. So I'm going to adapt my Devar Torahs to that particular portion. And in a way, it kind of resolves an issue that I've been working on, or a challenge that I've had since I started doing these, what is now known as my 10-minute Torah discussions, that I don't want to repeat the same commentary year after year after year. I like to mix it up. Doing the triennial cycle will kind of help me adapt commentary to that particular year, that particular triennial cycle. Okay. That being the case, what I'd like to talk about here is what specifically happens, chapter 13, at the end of this particular portion. Now, just to give ourselves a little bit of a refresh, Parashat Bo is the last 3 plagues, the locust, the darkness, and the killing of the firstborn. But there's a lot of information that goes along with the killing of the firstborn. And of course, let's be real plain about this, that this was the measure for measure that Hashem meted out to Pharaoh and to the Egyptian people for not just enslaving our ancestors, but for killing the firstborn. Why were the Egyptians also punished for that? And it wasn't just the Egyptian people, it was their slaves, it was their servants, it was their cattle, the firstborn of the cattle. Firstborn and it says in the Torah, in every single house, there was not one single household that didn't have a death. Even Pharaoh, even the palace. So why were the Egyptians punished as well? Because they didn't resist it. because they didn't stand up to Pharaoh. They didn't intervene and say, this is cruel. We can't do this. You just can't kill people just because it's not right. They went along with it. Interestingly enough, as Moses told the people from Hashem's instructions to gird your loins, that is, get ready, take your flowing robes that they wore back then, tie a sash, get all your possessions, and then ask your Egyptian neighbors for basically payment for 120 years of, not payless servitude. And the Egyptians gladly gave them spoils and let them on their way with gold and silver and other things too. And by the way, this became the premise of the commandment. Remember, up to this, now we're going to start getting into where Moses gets the Ten Commandments and all the other commandments follow. A lot, those commandments are really kind of based on things that have happened so far. And when it talks about releasing a slave, somebody who's worked for you, an indentured servant is what it really is. I don't like the word slave, that's just me. An indentured servant, when you release a person after their 7 years or their 6 years or whatever it is that they do, because you're up against, the sabbatical year, you send them off with gifts to get them started. And this is really kind of the precedent. So a lot going on. We're also here about the institution of the Pesach holiday, the festival. And Pesach has come to mean the dinner. Now, Pesach means passing over, Passover. That's where we get the word Passover because, of course, the destroyer, the angel of death, God's messenger, went over, and as the Israelites were commanded to slaughter uh, um, an offering and put the blood with the hyssop bush, a little bush, paint kind of their lintels with the blood, so the destroyer passed over it, and that's hence how we get the word Passover, of course. But here's another issue. A lot of times in the Torah, you will see the word angel and God being used interchangeably. Let's remember that God is this being with a capital B that's ineffable. We don't know who or what God is, but God uses angels as messengers, which I personally believe are an extension of God into the physical realm of Hashem. And that's what an angel does. So we're told to institute the Pesach, that we should gird their loins, we should get ready to leave. We go in full daylight, not like we're sneaking out. We're proud people with our heads held up high to become a nation. And this is the first part of us being Jews, the Passover celebration. At the end of the at the end of the portion, chapter 13, verses 1 through 8, and then verses 9 through 16. I know this because I just wrote my commentary. But you can believe I'm smart if you'd like. That's okay. I have no problem with that. So these are two passages that are in the tefillin. In the tefillin that we put on our arm, and we use the weaker arm, as the Eitz Chaim Chumash says, we use the weaker arm because God used his arm to rescue us from bondage. So we put the first tefillin block, the phylactery as it's called in English, on our weaker arm. If you're left-handed, you put it on your right, and between our eyes. And those two portions are two of the parchments. There are four that are in the tefillin boxes. Now, on the arm, they're kind of all together. On the head, there's like four little compartments, one with each parchment. Now, the other two, as you might imagine, is the Shema, it's the V'ahavta, and then the second paragraph, V'hayav im Shema tishma, it'll come to pass if you listen to my commandments. So those are the four parchments. And for myself, in my practice of praying every morning, of doing Shachrit, I recite those two passages. And when we're doing the Shema during the week, and we're wearing tefillin, when we do our weekly Torah portion, okay, as we say, as it should be in Hebrew, between your eyes, al yadai, al yadechem, you put it on your arm. I touch the arm tefillin and the head tefillin as kind of an acknowledgement. What do those portions say? Well, it says just that. It says, and you shall bind them on your arm and put them as a sign between your eyes. But it also talks about the fact that you will consecrate the firstborn. You remember the exodus from Egypt. So it's a reminder. In the same way, the mezuzah and the tzitzit are reminders. In the same way, and this is just my opinion, the laws of kashrut. You're eating because it's such a big part of our life. When you eat and you're eating certain foods that have been prepared, and in the case of animals, prepared in a shechita, slaughtered in a certain way, it's a remembrance. It's a sign of a covenant. So that's really what this is. It talks about remembering the Passover, remembering the fact that it was Hashem, God, that liberated us from Egypt. That's part of that sign to make us to his people, and we consecrate our firstborn in honor, and not just our firstborn born, but also those of our livestock. But we consecrate that to God in honor of the fact that Hashem spared our firstborn from the 10th plague. Shabbat shalom, everybody. I'm a little dressed down today, but I assure you, I'll be more dressed up later on. I will look forward to seeing you in services as we get back to our regular routine. Shabbat shalom.